Shalom, good evening. This is TV7 Israel News broadcast to you from Jerusalem. And in today's top stories, Commander of Iran's Revolutionary Guards Corps, Major General Hossein Salami, boasts in Iran's claimed success in arming Palestinian terror groups in Gaza and the West Bank. Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz responds to Hezbollah's threat of war, declaring that Israel is aware, strong, and prepared. Iran cynically accuses the United States of stalling its response to an Iranian-amended EU document aimed at reviving the 2015 nuclear agreement. Israel continues to root out terror elements throughout the West Bank districts of Judea and Samaria and the Jordan Valley as part of the prolonged Operation Wavebreaker. IDF, ISA, or Shin Bet, and Border Police Special Operations Forces conducted counterterrorism activities in multiple locations throughout the said territories, during which over 20 suspected terror operatives were apprehended and illegal weapons were confiscated. During the course of a number of the operations, exchanges of fire were reported between Palestinian militants and the Israeli forces, and while hits were identified among the Palestinian gunmen, no injuries were reported among the Israeli troops. Meanwhile, 3 Palestinian women were apprehended at the Eliyahu border crossing, which is located in the Samaria district. The woman reportedly drew suspicion upon arrival at the crossing, which consequently opted Operational Defense Ministry personnel to inspect their vehicle, in which a semi-automatic rifle and a suicide note were located. Thankfully, no injuries were reported, and defense authorities highlighted that a terror attack was effectively averted. Separately, Israeli forces have launched a wide-scale manhunt after a terror cell that opened fire toward an Israeli passenger bus on Saturday night while in transit near the Palestinian village of Silwad, which is located in the northern West Bank district of Binyamin. Thankfully, no injuries were reported to any of the passengers on board the bus, which was struck by a salvo of bullets. In response to the shooting attack, the Binyamin Regional Council Chairman Israelian stressed that the fact that no one was hurt was a very big miracle and called on Israel's defense authorities to exercise resolute and in-depth action immediately to eradicate terrorism and to restore deterrence. Meanwhile, approximately 3 weeks after the arrest of the senior official of the Iranian proxy, Palestinian Islamic Jihad in the West Bank, namely Bassam Saadi, the IDF spokesperson's unit announced the completion of the ISA or Shin Bet investigation and that the related material against him was submitted to the Judge Advocate General's office for its perusal. Subsequently, following a thorough examination, the Judge Advocate General's office announced that it plans to indict the senior Islamic Jihad official based on the material, and the military court granted the prosecution's motion and extended Saadi's remand by another 5 days. It is important to note that the arrest of Saadi by undercover Special Operations Forces of the Border Police Hamas unit brought about a pledge by the Islamic Jihad to perpetrate a deadly act of terror against Israeli civilians along the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip, which, as a consequence, Israel deliberately launched Operation Breaking Dawn that preempted the Iranian proxy's malign intentions. And while the Palestinian Islamic Jihad sustained a resounding defeat during the weekend hostilities between the 5th and the 7th of August, and as part of Operation Wavebreaker, hundreds of the terror group's operatives have been successfully detained, Iran's Revolutionary Guards Corps commander, Major General Hossein Salami, proclaimed that the Islamic Republic was successfully arming its proxies in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, pledging further Iran support for the Palestinians. In an interview with the official website of the leader of the Islamic Revolution, namely the Fars news agency, Major General Salami further proclaimed that Israel has no safe haven and that all parts of the land of Israel are within reach of the Palestinian resistance movement's firepower. He went on to boastfully declare that when Hezbollah is added to this equation, hundreds of thousands of missiles are pointed at the Zionist regime, which is in reference to Israel. Meanwhile, in Israel's northern neighbor, the leader of the Lebanese Iranian proxy, Hezbollah, namely Hassan Nasrallah, threatened Israel that unless it succumbs to Lebanon's demands regarding the East Mediterranean maritime demarcation, regardless of whether or not world powers sign a nuclear agreement with its patron, the Islamic Republic of Iran, the region will head to war.
سواء وقع الاتفاق النووي أو لم يوقع، إذا قدم للدولة اللبنانية ما تطالب به نحن رايحين على الهدوء، وسواء وقع الاتفاق النووي أو لم يوقع، إذا لم يعطى للدولة اللبنانية ما تطالب به نحن رايحين على تصعيد.
In response to the threats voiced by the leader of Hezbollah, Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz highlighted that while Israel is willing to reach an agreement with the Lebanese government via U.S. mediation, he hopes that an escalation would be averted since it would constitute a tragedy for the state of Lebanon and its citizens. In an interview to a radio station in Israel this morning, Jerusalem's top defense official further stressed that any attack by Hezbollah would be met with a response which could inevitably turn into a military campaign. Gantz stressed that Israel is aware, strong, and prepared. Nevertheless, it hopes that a conflict will be averted. The Israeli defense minister continued by underscoring that the emerging nuclear deal with the Islamic Republic of Iran is concerning to Israel, since the agreement is a bad agreement with many flaws. He further noted that Israel is against the emerging agreement and is maintaining contact with the Biden administration to express Jerusalem's position and is in parallel preparing to take action to ensure Israel's security interests are preserved. Meanwhile, in Tehran, Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Nasser Kanani cynically accused the United States of procrastinating that after Washington had not yet formally replied to Iran's response to an EU document, which was labeled as a final framework for the purpose of reviving the 2015 nuclear agreement. While the Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman further noted that Tehran views progress as relatively good, it continues to assert that it would not forgo any of its demands. Moreover, the Ayatollah regime has now concluded that the United States and Europe were more interested in a deal than the Islamic Republic of Iran itself.
هنوز از سوی طرف مقابل مشخصاً دولت آمریکا پاسخی به پیشنهادات طرف اروپایی دریافت نکردیم. تا زمانی که روی همه اون موضوعات توافق نشه نمیتونیم بگیم به توافق رسیدیم. اگر ایران نیازمند توافق هست، حتما طرف آمریکایی و طرف‌های اروپایی بیش از طرف ایرانی نیازمند توافق هستند.
It is important to note that the latest round of nuclear negotiations in Vienna were revived after months in which the Islamic Republic refused to re-engage in talks, while in tandem, obsessively ratcheting up its nuclear-related activities. And while at the culmination of indirect talks, the European Union's High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy sent a document to Iran which he declared to be a final offer to revive the 2015 nuclear deal, Josep Borrell altered his position today when he referred to Iranian amendments made to the EU document as reasonable, while further voicing hope that the United States would soon respond in favor.
Hubo una propuesta mía como coordinador de las negociaciones, hubo una respuesta iraní que yo consideré razonable, fue transmitida a Estados Unidos. Estados Unidos no ha contestado formalmente todavía, pero estamos esperando su respuesta.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden held a phone conversation with his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, and British Prime Minister Boris Johnson last night during which they discussed the ongoing negotiations over Iran's nuclear program. While no details immediately emerged from this discussion, a statement by the White House noted that the four leaders also discussed the need to strengthen support for partners in the Middle East region and joint efforts to deter and constrain Iran's destabilizing regional activities. Subsequently this morning, Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid held a phone conversation with French President Emmanuel Macron, during which the two leaders discussed the Iranian nuclear issue at length. According to a statement by the Israeli Premier's office, Lapid reiterated Jerusalem's opposition to a return to the agreement, as well as the need for a clear and unequivocal message that there will be no additional concessions to the Iranians. Prime Minister Lapid further emphasized that the Iranians are continuing to conduct negotiations on an offer which was presented as take it or leave it, and also warned that in that offer by the EU High Representative Borrell, there are new elements that go beyond the limits of the original JCPOA, and that it will pave the way for significant investment to flow into Iran's terrorist network and to strengthening the Iranian military. In response, the French president sought to alleviate Israel's concern by reaffirming the commitment of Paris to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. Thank you for watching TV7 Israel News. It is essential for us to underscore that TV7 Israel is a donation-based ministry. Therefore, if you're blessed by our productions, please consider making a financial contribution that in turn will enable us to sustain our ongoing operations. Additionally, I would like to encourage you to pray for our persecuted brothers and sisters worldwide and for the peace of Jerusalem and the salvation of Israel. I'm Jonathan Hessen wishing you a Shavua Mevorach, and we will see you again tomorrow at the same time.